Okay, so I wanted to talk for about 10-15 minutes about some strategies that I've been using in Canvas to deter cheating, and I'm sure some of you certainly, that's a good idea, yes. There we go. So I'm looking at quizzes and papers, and I haven't done online tests, but I would actually be curious to get feedback on that, because I'm interested. I've been looking at proctoring solutions, and I know that there's a testing subcommittee that's on campus that's been looking at some of these things. So first to quizzes. What I wanted. So doing online, in blended classes, I decided to use a lot of quizzes. And one of the first things is I just make them open book, right? Just watch the lectures, do the reading, and then take the quizzes. One of the things to kind of balance out the open book is I did put like a time frame on how long they could take the quiz, so they couldn't search through everything as they took the quiz. I wanted quizzes for formative assessment, so I could check in every week, see how they're doing, see if there's a question that a lot of people are getting wrong, so I can circle back and address that, especially in my blended class where I'm having the face-to-face meeting and then the face-to-face discussion section. I'm using that to constantly kind of take the pulse of the class, so I can find weak spots. I wanted participants to do it on their own, and then I wanted it graded on their own, right? It's graded magically, and I don't have to grade it. I just check the analytics to see what's going on. But I wanted to deter collaboration and answer sharing. I had always done quizzes in class, and so I wanted to make sure that people aren't sitting around in a group taking the quizzes together, or they're emailing each other answers or taking screenshots and sharing it with future or current students. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I don't know that I fully understand the definition of formative. Does formative assessment mean that you're not really taking grades on it?
I am taking grades. It's just that they're pretty low stakes.
Gotcha. And
it's covering material that they immediately just went over. So it's just you get the material, and I want to see how you did with a low stakes situation. So it's not like summing up several
weeks worth of stuff.
Exactly.
Big
Great.
exam or something.
Yeah, it's not cumulative. It's just what we just went over.
Okay.
Okay, so my aha moment with this was that open book was okay. I always felt like open book, you got to learn the material, but I felt like, you know what, if they know where to find it, that's good enough, and they can go and find it, because they have a time frame on the quiz, and so if they read it, they remember it was in this chapter, they can go to it.
Do you find that so you said to deter collaboration and working together on things?
Great.
Do you find that do they prepare for the quizzes collaboratively? Are there any, like, maybe they're too low stakes to work the study guides and such, but
I don't think they do.
Okay.
Like, I haven't gotten any sense that they do. And I find most students are doing it like right down to the wire.
okay.
So
Right.
like there's a few that like do it right away, and then it's like kind of two humps. So what I tried is I tried a really large question bank. So I'll just give you an example. If I can get this up. This comes up. It's not sharing it.
Is that somebody I know?
No, it's just.
So, that's not you in your house.
No way.
Okay.
I think that just came up automatically. I'm like, this is well, it's not showing me.
It's one of the student tests.
Yes. I feel like I'm too old to graduate. All right, well, I'll go back to the.
Fail, you're no longer in the class.
Let's see. Push it over. Okay. So this is a quiz I have that's worth 5 points. So that's actually one of my bigger, higher stakes quizzes. And if you look down, there's just a ton of questions. Some of the questions I just write several different ways. But I just go through, so it's highly unlikely that people are getting the same questions. If they're taking it with a friend. And the questions are in random order, so even if they get one or two of the same questions, they're not getting it at the same time. I just wanted to reduce that chance. So I used a large question bank, and then open book, right? I don't know. I always thought, like, it's open book. Why do I need to cheat? I can just look it up. I'm not going to ask my friend. And I had lots of randomly chosen questions out of the question bank, and then options for questions were randomly shuffled, so that you could say, hey, did you have this question? It was C. It would not be C for someone else. It might be B, just to kind of make it as uncertain as possible. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. So are they taking this in together?
They are not. They're doing this on their own. Yeah. Yeah. They have a week to do it. But once they log in, once they start the quiz, generally it's like 15 minutes and you've got to do the whole thing. So you don't have a chance to start emailing. I mean, if you've done the material and you think, oh, I remember that theory, I can't remember what it is, obviously you can just open the book and look at that page, but you've got to be pretty familiar with it to get through it. One of my disasters with this is that, oh, I have it on the next page, never mind. So another thing I wanted to do is I wanted to make the quizzes so frequent and so low stakes that to cheat would just be really hard to do. Like, you would have to be really organized to cheat on this. So students watch 2 to 4 lectures online every week, and after every one of those lectures is a little quiz. So you watch a lecture, you get a quiz. You watch a lecture, you get a quiz. Some of these quizzes are worth 1 point or 2 points, and a lot of the questions are worth like a half point, so you get 2 questions worth a total of 1 point, or 6 questions worth 3 points. So if you're going to sit down with a buddy and cheat, you've got to like do this for 4 quizzes, and you've got to be watching the lectures together. And at that point, I don't know if I even care if they're sitting there, watching the lectures together, talking about it. It makes it hard to do. And yeah.
Do you actually embed the lecture then into the quiz as part of the quiz description?
Yeah, I don't. I'm thinking of doing that in the future. I know you could do that with case scenario critical reader, which is gone. And so now I have, they watch the lecture, they go back to Canvas, do the quiz.
Okay.
But that's something I'm considering. I've been talking to case scenario critical reader people about, and doing some Captivate training to try to start embedding my quizzes in Captivate, because that would be really seamless.
Well, and Kaltura had the embedded quizzes, feature interactive embedded quizzes, so that even throughout the lecture video, you can stop and pause and have a quick quiz question, but then it's turned off on campus right now.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
So, when you set up the time limit,
great.
did you consider people with disabilities?
I didn't. I generally give them about 2 to 3 times more than I think they would need. So if they were going to take the quiz, knowing the material pretty well, it would probably take them about a minute or 2, and I generally give them about 10 minutes.
Because I had a lot of problems this last semester.
Okay.
In the fall semester with this, because I had set up quizzes like this that were like 10 minutes.
Right.
And then they said, well, I'm entitled to twice 15 or 20 minutes. And I said, well, but really, it should have only taken you 5. But I didn't say that up front.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that I had to say that up front, and this is already giving you extra time.
That's a good point. I haven't run into that, but that would be good to put on the
Well, I had like
syllabus.
5 or 6 people in my class.
Is it sufficient to just say it in front of the class and give the impression, if you had said that at the beginning of the class?
I think it has to be written down somewhere.
Yeah.
It has to be written somewhere and documented. It's not good enough to just say.
And saying after the fact would
Can you- Can you like tailor it in Canvas to like allow them to, certain students?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because you're not gonna be putting the McBurney stuff into Canvas or into.
There is an ability to do that, but it's a per student.
I think
Right.
I would do it the other way. I would say, look, we're gonna be twice as long as what we think this should take, and this will accommodate anybody with disabilities.
I mean, I suppose you put it in the description of the quiz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're still gonna
Even
have to
in the
like,
syllabus
no,
for
we
the
get
class,
time and a half,
so do it there.
so we get time and a half.
So, but I just ran into
Yeah,
big
that's a
problems
really
with
good
it.
idea. Because I did the same thing you did. I'm like, well, I'll give them twice as much or 3 times as much as I think they really need. And then I've never told them that. But I'm going to put it in my syllabus now and say,
Yeah.
give them 3 times as much time. So, right.
Julie?
I know another large class solution that's been used is when you create a quiz, you create 2 of the same exact quiz, and you assign one of them to, you create two groups of students, basically. You have a group of students who haven't said that they have a McBurney visa, and then you create a group of students that does have a McBurney visa, and then you can assign this group gets this quiz and this group gets this quiz. It's the same exact quiz, but one of them has a longer time. So that's I think Miguel has used that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that does enlarge the grade book a little bit. You got
Right.
Every quiz is represented twice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I know you can like add that extra deadline for a student, but you can't. Can you like just hit an add and add more time for
It's the add option, if like within the definition of the quiz,
Yeah.
that just gives them different due dates, different
Okay.
available and until dates. It doesn't
Okay.
change the time per quiz.
Okay.
Time per quiz, that's done in the moderate area.
So yeah, that's like on my radar is to kind of start embedding quizzes within the lecture, and I haven't done that yet. That's my next project. I think you can do it in Storyline as well, but I haven't been using Storyline. I've just been using mostly Captivate. And then the other thing is like I just quiz them to death. Every quiz is just worth like 1 to 3 points. But you know, when they get to the end of the semester, the quizzes are like 15% of the grade, so that can really sink you. And it always breaks my heart when I see students who are just like blowing off the quizzes because I email them. I try to, especially at the beginning of the semester, I try to find the students who aren't doing the quizzes and start sending them like, hey, you really need to do this. But after the second or third week, they're on their own. But yeah, it does add up to a large portion of the grade. So it seems like it's not worth it, and then but it really is. But what has happened, it's mostly worked out really well. The students like it. They like the accountability of being held to the material by a date. It's almost like they like me kind of saying you have to have gone through the material by this date and taken the quiz, because otherwise they might procrastinate. They like the freedom to kind of go over it on their own. There's been some problems with question difficulty, and then there's some questions that everyone's getting right. There's some questions that 60% of people are getting right, and I'm just hoping this randomly evens out so nobody's getting hit with those hard questions. Like the big disaster was I was writing questions. Like I always write questions on paper. And I was using like all of the above and none of the above. But then when it's randomly shuffled, this should have been obvious to me, but I just was like a blind spot. Students were taking this very literally, so when it said like all of the above, they're like, well, there's 2 above, and so she must have talking about those and not the ones. I'm like, well, I just meant that as a metaphor. So now I've changed it to all of these and none of these. But it did I had to go back and give everybody credit. And then I had to go back and because I had spent all summer writing these questions and putting them in Canvas, and I had to go check every question to make sure I wasn't doing this. So both A and B couldn't do it on this. Yeah, did you have a question?
Well, and so that effect is triggered, that jumbling or shuffling, that's triggered by the checkbox on that kind of that navigation page of the quiz. But if you're doing the kind of quiz that you got there, where it's a bank of pick 5 of the following 30 questions, I'm curious, is this option even necessary at this point? You need because that shuffle is for the answer for the answers.
Yeah, I was
doing
doing
the body
both.
of the quiz itself, when they pull in, they'll jumble them in whatever order. So at some point there's not really value in shuffling the answers if they're already shuffling the questions they get and what sequence they show up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good point because I had done it all 3 because I was so paranoid that I just thought they could if they're gonna say it's answer B, but I don't. Yeah, I think you're right. That's not happening a whole lot. But I've rewritten all my questions by now, so.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah.
This is secure now against any future.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of work up front writing the questions and writing lots of questions, and I felt like I was writing the same question 5 different times. And another thing was I would write a version of the question a few times, but try to make it different enough in case someone got it a couple times. But it was really excellent feedback for me. It's made my teaching better because now I know what students are having problems on, and I can go back and look at that And I know I can like log in an hour before class and see, by an hour before class, like 80% of the students have taken the quiz. Because I usually have it.
That's that second hump, right?
Yeah, I know. The class starts at 2:25. I have the class, the quiz due at 2:30, and so I imagine the students that get to class and start doing the quiz. And then I have been trying to revisit the question pool. So my one class, I'm just getting at the 2-year mark, and I'm like, it's time to go back and start revisiting the question pool, and so that's a summer project. So once it was done, I'm like, whew. But now it's another load of work again. So that was with quizzes. Any other questions or suggestions? Yeah.
I'm wondering how the kinds of questions you ask might have changed doing this over how you used to ask questions.
Right. So I do. They're more specific. They're more tied to examples because I assume that I always tried to do more kind of abstract theoretical questions before. And now it's more about, well, you saw this example, and I assume that at that point the example's still fresh in their mind, so let's talk about that example. What was the example of the source characteristic in it, and like identify that, which I wouldn't have done, I wouldn't do that for kind of a longer range. But knowing that they've just gone through the material, I do get more specific, and it's a lot of it's just more recall than application. I use more of the application. I have them do case studies after the lectures and quizzes as well, and there they kind of type up an application. So this is more, and I warned them several times, like these quizzes are easier than the test. So
Okay.
It's more of like, did you watch it? Did you see it? Can you remember? And then usually you
So in follow-up to that, has this impacted their ability to respond to those application questions compared to how they used to respond to them?
I don't know, because I've done it in tandem. I did everything at once.
Okay.
So the application stuff, I put that online along with the online quizzes. And before, the application stuff, we used to do it in class, and it was always the same 10% of students, answering the questions. So it's hard to make a comparison.
Okay.
Yeah.
How are these graded?
They are graded on a point system, so it's included. It's just put on the points, so it's like added to the points.
Do you grade them or are they automatic?
They are automatically graded.
And so when you have questions where like you ask for examples, do you how do you have a
Right.
answer for that?
So the ones that I grade in the Canvas quizzes they're all multiple choice and true false.
Okay.
I do have some application stuff, and some of that isn't graded, and other stuff is graded, but as long as they type something, they just get the credit, and it's usually like a point.
Okay.
So,
they can type anything.
Right, they can type anything. I don't let them know that.
Yeah.
But and then I'll kind of spot check that and might like read 20% of them to talk about class.
Okay.
Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
Just another solution for the different levels of questions, right? Some of them more challenging or less challenging. You could create a pool of challenging questions and a pool of medium questions and a pool of easy questions. And then you could say okay, I'm gonna set it so every student gets one challenging question, one medium question, and one easy question.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
I mean, again, it would be work up front, but it's an option.
Yeah, and especially once you've gotten statistics from previous courses, then you can really nail it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you think something is hard and it's not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, then go on to papers. So again, moving, I've been putting some classes online and some blended classes, and I've started to change the way I have papers. I wanted papers that had a real world application, so I was kind of ditching kind of the research paper, and I was using a lot more shorter papers. And again, trying to have lots of low stakes shorter papers that would deter cheating, using a mix of formative assessment and summative assessment. So a lot of formative assessment for the short paper. We just went over this theory, apply the theory in this context, define it and apply it. So I had a lot of these define, apply, short papers that students would do. And then there was some summative case studies where after like 5 weeks of material, they had to apply case study material. And one thing I did is I just try to use really specific topics. And I don't know, if this always is not always feasible in every class, but I was teaching persuasion, and so I just kept finding new persuasive case studies to use. Or I let the students pick a topic, and then I okay their topic. So usually students are doing different topics from one another, so they can't really cheat off each other. Or from past semesters is easy. So students, in my persuasion class, students have to pick a topic. Usually they have to think about a pro-social behavior they would like to persuade people to do. And then they work with this topic throughout the whole semester. And everybody in like a discussion section has to have a different topic. So whether it's like washing your hands during flu season, or eating more vegetables or in the gym, or not walking home late at night from the bar, stuff like that. And so then they're doing a lot of little short papers that are related to their specific topic, and it's not transferable to anyone else because it's theirs. So it makes it a lot more difficult to cheat that people are using different topics. Other times I have students, I call them field exercises. They have to use a concept, and then they have to report back how it went. And again, because I teach persuasion, this works. I can say, go try to use this persuasive technique and let's see how it went. And I use a lot of case studies that I change from year to year, and so that they can get papers from previous participants, which actually happened to me in the past where I wasn't doing this, and I found like 4 students use somebody's old paper, and that's when I started just mixing it, changing the case study every semester. So you can't like get your buddy's case study.
I love the idea of having them do the field trips, because that fits in so nicely with the purposeful action part of the Wisconsin experience,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Great.
So they go out and have a conversation to convince people to wash their hands during flu season, for example, and then think about that. What did I do well? What did I not do well? That's cool.
Yeah, yeah. I have like 6 of them. So, and they're really fun to talk about when we have our face-to-face discussion section. I use that in my blended course. So like here's an example when I did I make them do this the first week. They have to like, suggest a similarity between themselves and another person, and then they have to report what happens and why do you think this happened. So like an example, this semester someone was at a bar, her name is Becky, she overheard someone else say, calling out Becky. She went up and said, my name is Becky too. They were best friends by the end of the night. Why do you think this happened? And we talk about persuasion and liking and similarity. So again, it's kind of hard to recreate, and the examples are so specific, and they're pretty easy to write. But you still have to define the theory and apply it. Here's another one. Use one of these 5 compliance gaining techniques in the next week on someone. A lot of them use their parents. And define the technique you used and how you used it, how did it go. And so then they report back. And again, it's pretty specific, so it's hard. And I mean, it could be that they just pretend they did this, but most of the time I think they're doing it.
Do they recognize that those compliance gaining techniques had been used by the parents on them?
Yeah.
No, that's how they did it.
Right, yeah, or then they start using it on me and I don't notice. I just love it. I need an extension on the paper. Okay, sure. Here's an example I use of define and apply it papers, which I do a lot. So apply the theory of reasoned action to your campaign topic. That would be like, getting people to wash their hands in flu season. How could you use this theory to persuade people to do the pro-social behavior you picked? Define and apply it. And that's like worth 2 points. And they're super easy to grade because I look at their definition and then it's a correct application. And usually when I grade it, I have a definition that I can cut and paste if they didn't get it right. Here's an example of a case study that I'm using this semester. So this was published last April. So it's, and it's from the New Yorker, so they can't go on the internet and find a paper to cheat off of. And I'm only using it this year, so they can't get their friends' papers from last year. So they have to write a paper about van life, which is like an Instagram movement, and a lot of the van life people are promoting products on their Instagram feeds, and so they have to talk about this. So So, and we talk about source factors. They talk a lot about, they show lots of pictures of themselves nude on their Instagram feed, and that's the ones that get the highest analytics scores. So, we'll talk about that, because it is a form of persuasion. So.
Great, it must be great articles.
So then, and last year I used one at McDonald's, and I'm still looking around for one next year to use. So kind of my aha moment with the papers was that short papers and applying concepts work well. Like not all papers have to be rigorous, and like having these short papers that they can type out in half hour, and I can grade in a minute, works really well. The papers under a page, with a really specific rubric. Did you define it right? Did you apply it right? If they did both, I can just give them the 2 points and move on. If they didn't, I can cut and paste the definition, write a sentence or so about applying it. And so I can get through like 20 of these in about a half hour, 40 minutes. So it's easy to get through. 1 point, 1 point. And what happened, it worked well. The shorter papers were really easy in SpeedGrader. Just get right through them. If I had like 5 minutes to spare, I would just get my SpeedGrader up, try to knock out a few, and then whenever I had a little sliver of time, it seemed to make the grading really easy. The longer papers, this would be a longer paper where they have to write about a 5-page paper on van life Instagram movement and how they're promoting products through van life. Then I use the rubric form on that I can kind of click the buttons that they're doing it correctly. So even that is not too bad.
When they did the paper, did they actually type it into Canvas?
Yeah, I don't think they are. They're usually just file upload. So and Dropbox.
A Word document?
Yeah.
So I got a text file on something the other day, and you can't see it directly in Canvas. You have to download it again.
Oh.
And it's like, I don't know what they did, but I don't know how it got there. But everybody else's was fine.
Yeah.
I could see, but this was an actual .txt file.
You can limit that and say, I only accept .doc or .docx or.
Yeah.
I told them that.
No, I mean, you can.
Yeah, you can actually say
you
that.
can press the buttons and, no TXT files, no .pages or whatever files.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, because I haven't run into that with anybody yet.
What is acceptable, not what isn't,
Right.
what are allowable formats.
Now, what Miguel and Garcia Gonzalez figured out was that every time using the SpeedGrader, it has to take that file format and you get that little spinny thing while it translates it into their format. So he has his students do whatever they want, type it in whatever they want, copy, paste it into the field in Canvas, and then it doesn't have to do any translation. It keeps most of the formatting unless you've got links and stuff in it. So actually I think it keeps links too. So it does a very good job of that. But that means if you're grading a little bit, especially if you have lots of them to go
Yeah,
through.
yeah, they're the same.
Right.
Yeah. All right. The one thing is I'm always kind of looking for case studies. I mean, some of them you just kind of stumble upon. Like I find them in New York Times, and so I just kind of have to keep my eyes open. If I'm reading an article, I'm like, oh, this could be a case study.
Do you interview students for that and have them solicit or solicit their ideas?
I haven't. That's a good idea though. If they find stuff.
So, I mean,
Yeah,
most of them probably won't apply, but some once in a while.
Yeah, I have had a graduate student send me some good stuff. So, like former TAs are like,
Yeah.
I remember you reading this. I do have some favorite ones. Like I have fallen in love with. There's one on McDonald's marketing strategy that I used 2 years ago, and I love it. And I may use it again because I really didn't want to give it up, and I figured after 2 years I can put it in there again. Like whoever they know took the class will have done something else. Last year I used Catherine Hayhoe, the climate change scientist from Texas A&M. We talked about source factors, and they really like the van life one too. So I might use that again in a year or two. Or I might find something. There's one on Reddit I might use too.
classroom consciousness handwriting exercise? I mean, do you ever have them write stuff?
No, not in the classroom.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know I'm not an educator, so I don't know if that's good or bad. That just would be an interesting thing. If you're into persuasion, just the thought of having to write.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Here's the topic.
I also know people just don't write anymore, so I just thought it would be interesting if they're always typing, how hard is it to get students to now actually write with the pen.
Right. Yeah. Well, actually, in my other class, it's a flipped class, so they come to class and all they do is write. But they write they work on their case study and then they submit it. So I take that back. They do write, but yeah, they have a homework assignment. They come to class and they do a homework assignment, and it's written a page or two, and then they turn it in. It's meant to take like a half hour, 40 minutes.
So the quizzes are 1 to 3 points, the papers are 1 to 3 points.
Yeah.
Are the papers also worth 50% in total, or how many points are there in the class?
Yeah, so it depends. Yeah, because I kind of blended like both the classes I'm doing. I think the papers, like the little 1 to 2 point papers, are worth about 12% of the graded in my persuasion class. They have to turn in 8 of them.
Okay.
So and each one is worth, so it's well, I guess it's about 8% of the grade then. And then they have the small quizzes. So yeah, there's lots of stuff they have to do.
Yeah.
A lot of it's really small, but it starts to add up. And I used to have a class where it was kind of like 3 tests, 1 big paper, and that was it. That's how I did it 5 or 6 years ago. And people who cram, they could do well with that. And now I still have the 3 tests. The tests are actually worth less. I still have the big paper at the end, but the smaller papers are actually leading up to the big paper. So but there's just all these little things they have to do. You know, and if you're not an organized person, that's where it can hurt you. But my reasoning is that's kind of like any job you get is just like all these little things you constantly just have to do, like every day, every week. And so this is probably more reflective of how your job is going to be.
This also really aligns with what Martin Gernsbacher advocates for the people who have accessibility problems or some hidden disabilities, or someday, you know, something happens. And instead of, you know, if it were the day when the big 30% of your grade test happened, you would be sunk, and that would be out of it. But if it's a 1 to 3 point day, it's 1 to 3 points.
Right,
so.
yeah. Yeah, and you know, I tell them I don't grant extensions on quizzes, but I always do. Like, there's always stuff going on there. Yeah, I tell them you have a week to take the quiz. If you get the flu the night before the quiz is due, I don't give you an extension because you had only a week to do it, but you know, it's still common. It's hard to say no. All right, and the last thing is tests. I've been looking at online proctoring software for tests. In my blended and flipped classes, I still use the paper tests. And online, I haven't done testing yet. I just decided to go no testing. Maybe the quiz is worth more, included more papers and discussion sections. So I haven't tried this yet. One of the things when I was doing Teach Online, I was talking to someone who does do online proctoring, and they said that the school has to pay for it, not the students.
Yes, it's called Proctor Track, and it's $25 for 2 tests per student.
Yeah.
Per student, so it's not inexpensive, but the School of Business is doing it if you want to learn more.
Okay, yeah. But I told that to my chair, I'm like, I think the department has to pay for it. He's like, not gonna happen.
Yes.
So well, I just won't have tests.
So, TEACH, which is Teaching, Learning, Technology Advisory Group.
Yes.
We have a whole subgroup that's looking at this online testing. There will be policy stuff coming out in the next 6 months or so about what's going on for campus.
Is it looking like it might be more one solution for all of campus type thing? Too early to say.
It's too early to say. I mean, right now they're coming up with different things, and there'll be some proposal coming out of this eventually. So it's hard to say because you have really different expectations in pharmacy, and engineering, and these other schools, and they're all really different in what they've been doing. And It's like we can't have all these different things. If campus is gonna pay for it, it can't be all these different things. So it's like, how do we pick what's gonna be used and stuff? And
So are they looking for papers too, like turn it in, or they're only looking at examining?
No, this is just like examining stuff, but it could be things that lock browsers, it could be a variety of different things, whether this is going to be the student brings their own computer or there has to be computers available in the space, variety of different things, so.
So at the last year's InstructureCon, which is the Canvas big international event, the proctoring software people were by far the #1 segment of vendor there, and there's like 30 of them, and they all had great swag. It was just kind of, it's interesting. I love the idea of just avoiding the tests or making the tests so that they're so personal and applicable only to Lynn that nobody else can steal or copy the
Your
idea.
approach is much better
Yeah.
on those proctor tests where they're gonna spy on the students.
And it's cheaper and it makes the students feel better, right? Because they're not feeling big brothered.
About it. Yes, I know.
Yeah.
But how do you have, I had a few students years ago that were saying, like, when you do things like that, how can I be sure that my grade is the same as everybody else's grade, you know? Particularly where you have, you know, and I got that you have all these small ones, but eventually you do have exams. And so the question is, if there are different questions for different people on there, did they really get exactly the same? And what if somebody complains about it? Then what do you have to do once somebody complains? And that was what I could never figure out what I would do.
I mean, do people ever get the same thing out of a class? I mean, even if they memorized all of the things the night before and got the same grade on a test, there's still like the way that they understand things and the way that they would apply things is different.
And yeah, I know, and I don't know, I just didn't know how to respond to the person at that point. I didn't know what I should say.
I wondered about that, like even with these quizzes where you have a bank of 50 questions and you can identify it, some are a little harder than the others. So if somebody were to get hit with that one bad combination of all of the 7 really hard questions, I come out of here with a 60% on the quiz.
It was your unlucky draw.
It was my unlucky draw. So I wonder about that too. It's like, you know, but it's such a ubiquitous approach. Everybody does this banking where you just get picked 5 out of the 20 or whatever. Everybody does it. I don't know what the answer is, but it seems like there's room for everybody, all students to complain about the injustice.
Laura.
So this may be the parent in me coming out, but what I've tried to teach my children, though they still don't buy in as teenagers, is fair does not mean the same. It means everybody gets what they need, and that would be the same response that I would give to a student. And since these are, you know, low stakes quizzes, if that would happen one time, it's really not going to impact their grade, and the likelihood of it happening 12 times.
But take it to the big exam. If you got the one big exam.
Yeah.
But I think Julie's idea about, okay, well, we take those hard questions and separate them out and do that. So that's a good way to kind of mitigate that. And you can say, listen, I know my quiz questions well enough. I protected you against that. That's not going to happen. So that is a good response. That doesn't totally answer what your original question was.
Well, to my defense for the students that complain about is this fair, blah, 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 I always throw out the item analysis, the question analysis, and I'm like, this is an objective way of how we're analyzing it, whether it's fair, whether it's not, because it has that regression and all that stuff. And I try to explain it in a way that they can understand. They're like, oh, okay. So usually that gets me, and I'm like, this is an objective way.
Yeah.
This is not my opinion. This is what math is telling me and stats is telling me. So I usually ask them.
That's good.
Right, even if they don't understand it, they respect it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the other thing that we can do is be really clear about our learning objectives, right? Our quiz, our intention isn't to like hide what they should be learning, right? We should clearly ahead of time state, this is what we want you to know, and I use this quiz to assess some of that, but you're still expected to know those learning objectives. Like those are still the learning objectives of my course, and so, you know, maybe you didn't get a question about it on the quiz, but that's still, you know, a required aspect of the course. So
You should be able to go through the entire question bank, regardless of which ones you got chosen for you. So.
Are these considered study questions for the bigger exams? The quiz ones?
Yeah, they are, because it covers the same material. The quizzes are at a little lower level. They're more about, kind of just recall. You just went through the material, can you recall this, can you recall that, do you identify this? The test is more application.
So I guess my question then is this a major requirement for a major, or is this a elective course, general ed course?
Yeah, it is. One of them is, that I do this in is required for the major, or it's one of two required courses. They can decide which one to take. The other one is just a higher level course that is not required.
So my question was, would they then print out all these questions? And then would a bank of them be shared with students in future years in that class? Because that happens.
Yeah, they might happen.
The class I taught this spring, I know some students printed out all of those questions. And I did use quiz questions as part of the mid-semester test and the end of semester test. So my quiz questions were at the same level as the test. And I actually thought that was okay, because I wanted to learn the material. So I print it out and you're sharing and you're talking about it. But the tests were also done in class, on paper.
Yeah, I think they could start to put together a test bank if they.
Yeah, I was thinking more if there was an online test eventually.
Oh, yeah.
And they had this whole set of quiz questions, this whole set of questions that they could put in front of them. They could print out, and then they could sit there, and then they could take your online test with all these things right in front of them. That was more what I was worried about, rather than having to do it in class.
So, I have a comment about that. So I have Canvas online quizzes that are low stakes, and mine are uploaded on like Study Blue and blah, blah, blah. I know they're circulating. There are some students that do my quiz in 3 minutes and get a 100%. And I'm like, whatever. Come to lab, and then I give them a lab exam. If I could correlate the ones who, you know, did these online Canvas quizzes in 3 minutes and get a 100%, and then I look at their lab exam, which are on paper, and the questions are more application and critical thinking, the highest grade they ever get on my exam is a C. So I'm just like, you cheated, that's what you get, you didn't understand it, so that's the grade you deserve in my lab exam. So I think this has been good trade-off, yeah.
Right.
So I don't worry about it too much. I'm like, that's on you if you don't want to try to understand the material and you just want to memorize it, because you can't do that in my class, or my section of the class, so.
There is that element of, at some point, student, it is your responsibility to do for your learning what you take out of it.
I want to just make a quick comment too about the online proctoring, because I did work with an instructor a few years ago that wanted to pilot it, and as an instructional designer and a course developer, it adds a whole other layer of technology and testing, and we had to think about multiple devices and platforms, and then like if the iOS side had an update, then the software wasn't working, and he had to change the date of his quiz. And I got some horribly stressful emails because I would be copied on it from students saying, oh my God, this happened, and I can't get in, I got locked out, and I only have this amount of time. So for any child or any kid that has any student that has any kind of test anxiety, it's horrible. And I also have college-age kids, so from a parent perspective, it was really offensive to me that, and I've told my kids, if you have a class that wants to do remote proctoring, I would recommend you not take it, because you have an instructor that doesn't believe in that you're an honorable person, and I'm sure students cheat, and maybe my kids cheat, but it's so creepy that you have to, I don't think they do, quite honestly, because of course they're perfect. It's just so horrible. You have to pick up your computer and you have to scan it around the room and show that you have nothing on the walls, and you have to show the underside of your surface, and it's so, and then it's taking a picture of the student's face the whole time. It's just, to me, it just totally, just really disgusted me. So I hope as campus we don't go that route. I think it's really insulting.
We need to hear more about like what Liz is sharing here. I think
Yeah,
our strategies
all these great strategies.
There's
There's so many ways that we can do things better and differently.
So my comment on campus is they're looking at everything.
Yeah.
There are very different opinions.
Right.
They're really different. And so, yeah. But,
You're on campus.